Brought to you from Melbourne, Australia. This is the Badminton Podcast, a community for badminton players by badminton players, where we talk badminton, celebrate local heroes, interview players from all walks of life, and push you to grow as a player and a person. Introducing your hosts, Jeff and Henry.
Welcome to the Badminton Podcast. I'm Henry.
And I'm Jeff.
And we're the co-founders of Volant Wear. And we're here because we love badminton. Thanks for joining us. We're so excited to be here with the next episode of our podcast. If you want to find out more about what our podcast is about and why we started, please listen to our introduction episode.
Our guest for today's episode is Justin Lee. Justin is an accredited exercise physiologist, personal trainer, and an avid badminton player. He is extremely passionate about health and fitness, and his vision is to create a future where people maintain a healthy lifestyle in the absence of injury. He has been researching strength training and injury prevention for badminton players and has become an expert in this area. Thanks for being on the show, Justin.
Thank you for having me. Gee, what an introduction. It's like, how do you follow up on that? But yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be on your podcast. It's a real pleasure, and yeah, looking forward. Let's go.
Absolutely. We're really privileged to have you on as well, because we know that you have a wealth of information to share with everyone that's listening. So Justin, I've known you for not that long, but we have had a few chats previous to this podcast recording. And you did start badminton relatively late, and you've been playing for a little while now though. But how did you actually get started, and when did you start?
The first time I played proper badminton, meaning on a court with shoes, well, not with shoes actually, but with a racket that wasn't from Kmart. Okay, I first started playing badminton when I was about 18. I was in the first year of uni. My high school friend, who unbeknownst to me at the time was actually an A-grade player, he invited me and two other friends, so 3 complete beginners, to play with him at a social session. And we all thought we were doing pretty well. We had a really good time. And pretty soon it went from just a once a week thing to twice a week, 3 times. And then I was playing as often as I could play.
How did you go that very first time, Justin? Did you get a win?
Well, I was telling all my mom and all my friends, like, yeah, I hit a smash.
That's the best thing about it. I can smash. That's the main prerequisite of badminton success when you start, I think. And scooping the shuttle up with your racket.
They're good.
So from the first time you started playing, did you fall in love with the sport straight away, or did it take some time to actually realize, hey, this is really cool. This is what I really want to be doing?
Oh, it definitely wasn't just like that. It took some warming up to. But as I saw more people playing like proper badminton, and I was playing it more myself, I started to realize that I really did love every single part of the sport. I have this theory about sport and people. I think that every single person has a sport that's just right for them, like the sport that gives them the most satisfaction or enjoyment. And then the more I played badminton, the more I realized that this was the sport for me. So I love all the parts of badminton. But to sum it up, the things I enjoy the most would be the speed of badminton, like the reaction time aspects. And also what I think is really cool is the amount of playtime you get per person. If you compare it to a game such as soccer, where there's one ball for 2 teams of 11, there's actually not a whole lot of playtime. But if you commit badminton, which is one on ball, 1 on 2, then you actually do get a lot of enjoyment for the time that you put in. So that's what I really like about it.
So it's actually a really unique perspective, because a lot of the times we bring people onto the podcast and they tell us about, the same sort of things that you talk about, the speed of the sport and the delicacy of the sport, as well as a lot of the various other aspects of the sport. But what you talked about here was actually playtime, and that's something that's very different. I mean, a lot of people touch on things like the community, and I'm sure you enjoy the camaraderie, or else you wouldn't go back after that A-grade session with your mate. So yeah, I think that's actually quite a very interesting perspective. In terms of these days, I mean, how often and where are you playing?
Currently, I'm playing about twice a week. Well, I'm playing twice a week on Monday and Friday night. I play at the Silverwater Badminton Works. I really like that facility because they have rubber mats, which are less painful when you dive on them. And I also recently started training or coaching with my friends for 2 hours every Saturday.
Great. And in addition to that, I know that you're in the gym working out, and of course, with your work and your qualifications as an exercise physiologist and a personal trainer, you're doing your own training at the gym as well. How often are you in the gym?
Oh, well, I'm actually pretty much in the gym every single day, if not multiple times a day. Usually when I'm training with clients, I have to do a lot of demonstration of the exercises. So I wouldn't call that as a workout though. In terms of structured workouts, I'd say I do about 4 per week, and that's just right for me. But I'm always in the gym, always doing something.
Great. And so in terms of your progress with badminton, you started when you were 19 years old in first year of uni. How have you gone since then? Have you done anything you're really proud of? Have you achieved something that you thought maybe you couldn't have done previously?
Yeah, I definitely don't think I could have won a badminton tournament when I started. My best tournament result was winning the C grade men's doubles in the ACT Open in May this year. I've also won a D grade SCBA mixed teams tournament, as well as runners up in the UNSW East Open men's doubles C grade. So I've had a few wins, and that all started coming this year. So that would have been about in the 4th year of playing. That's when I started to actually keep up in tournaments. But the interesting thing is, I think I played my first tournament after 2.5 years. It was a D grade singles tournament. I didn't even play singles at the time, and I went in that tournament thinking I had a really good shot of winning. But yeah, I lost first round and lost first round consolation. And
That's everyone.
Yeah, and the guy I lost first round to was actually, I think, at least 50 years old. So that was a bit of a wake up call.
Oh, we still lose to 50, 60-year-olds these days as well.
Yeah.
Well, I do anyway.
That's a very typical start out in badminton. You lose to an uncle that's about 50 or 60. You think you're okay. You lose to an uncle first round, and then you lose to another uncle first round in consolation. Everyone's been there.
It's really great to see that you've produced some results.
And of course, winning and doing all that stuff is all really good and well. And we love to win, and it's really enjoyable to do that. Other than the winning side of it and developing, what have you felt that badminton has helped you with in your life? Has it impacted you in any way that potentially you might not have learned something or done something in particular if you didn't pick up the racket that very first day?
Oh, without a doubt. Badminton has definitely helped me stay fit in terms of cardio, because I don't think anything else can motivate me to do like this much like high intensity interval training, like 3 back-to-back games of singles. Badminton is definitely what I can thank for being able to run nowadays, because I definitely don't do any cardio in the gym. In terms of like life lessons and what it has taught me, it sounds a bit strange, but I think playing badminton has helped me learn how to stay calm under pressure. Just by virtue of me losing all the time, I've learned to embrace, difficult situations. Like when I'm playing doubles and the other team's attacking or driving down, I'm always thinking about how to turn like defense into offense. And in a way I feel like that's translated into me being a bit calmer. Oh, and I also met my girlfriend through badminton, so that's been pretty great. So shout out to Rio. And yeah.
Hi, Rio.
Hello, Rio.
You'd be surprised how many people we talk to that we don't always mention it on the actual podcast, but so many of the people who we actually speak to, including Henry, has met their partners through badminton.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I think badminton's really good because it's one of those sports where the social aspects and the sportsmanship really, really shines through. And you get to play on the court and then socialize while you're waiting. And I just think it's a really good experience, not just like the sport, but just for the social aspect of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Moving on from badminton, we want to move into the main topic of this podcast. And the main topic is preventing badminton injuries through strength training, which you're a bit of an expert in, Justin. So what I want to do is get a bit of an understanding of your background knowledge as well as your expertise in this area.
Right, definitely. By trade or by career, I am an exercise physiologist. And that's a branch of allied health involving exercise rehabilitation and injury prevention in the human body. So just for a bit of context, allied health is the branch that all non-medicine degrees fall under. So that includes like physiotherapy, chiropractors, dietitians and all that. So it's a 4-year university degree. My passion/specialty within this is musculoskeletal injury rehab and prevention. So the 3 things I always preach to people is that if you have an injury, active recovery is the number one thing. So if you just rest an injury, it'll get better, but it won't get better as fast, and it won't get better as with as much resilience. The next thing is fixing the underlying problems that cause any injuries that you have. Often people who sustain injuries have poor movement patterns, and moving in a less optimal way puts more strain or wear and tear on your joints than it should. And the last thing I believe in is preventing re-injury through strength training. So yeah, and in terms of the badminton, I've read pretty much every single study or article that's been put out on the internet on the field of badminton and musculoskeletal injuries. And I've also spent a bit of time reaching out and talking to professional players about their strength and conditioning training and what they believe the purpose of it is.
Just out of curiosity, how many articles actually are there about badminton?
I will say not as much as any other sport, but also enough to keep me busy. So if I open my articles folder, there's about 25 to 30. And some of these, I actually had to email the authors just for them to send it to me, because a lot of these articles are hidden behind paywalls. But yeah, there's about 25 to 30 articles. Probably at least 10 of them are proper clinical trials, with the other 20 being just expert opinions.
Just a bit of a fun fact. I remember when I was training in England, it would have been in 2007/2008, around that time. I actually was at Brunel University and I was doing a study there. I was one of the participants in the study. It's not really related to strength and conditioning and musculoskeletal things, but what they did was I had to watch a series of videos and basically look at someone's stroke just before they hit the shuttle, and then it'll say where the shuttle was actually going.
Predict.
Yeah, and predict that. So that was quite interesting. That just came to my mind when you were talking about studies.
By any chance, have you read this particular study, Justin?
I feel like I have. I'm not sure if it was for badminton, but I have read it where you compare beginners versus advanced players, and then advanced players can recognize where the shuttle is going to land while seeing less of the movement compared to a beginner.
Yeah, unless there's been more than one study about it, that was it. Because, yeah, there was beginners doing it and I was doing it. And, yeah, I remember just sitting in a dark room with the video kind of and just pressing buttons to say, hey, I think it's going to land in the rear court on the forehand side, for example.
That sounds like the funnest video game. No, that's really cool. So, yeah, it's good to see that there are starting to be more studies in badminton. I think there would be quite a few in China, but they're not so readily accessible. But yeah, badminton's definitely like an emerging sport in the Western countries. So I think it's only starting to, as well as sports science also being an emerging field, the two are starting to come together. And now in the recent years, there's been a lot more discussion in the scientific world about how to optimize badminton training and all that good stuff. So I think the next few years are going to be pretty big for badminton.
Yeah. So based on the 25 to 30 studies that you have read, Justin, what do you think are the key muscle groups for badminton players specifically?
Like, it's really tempting for me right now to list all of them, just because badminton is just such a dynamic sport where you can move in pretty much any direction, and there's really no muscle group that you can neglect in badminton. But if I had to say what are the most important ones, I'd go off on what seems to result in the most injuries. So I would have to say forearm muscles, which in the club or social level, a lot of people are wearing those forearm straps for tennis/golfer's elbow. So I think forearm muscles is one of them. Lower back from deep lunges. So people often strain their lower back after retrieving a drop shot. And also the muscles of the ankle help prevent ankle sprains. So those are probably the three main muscle groups. I'd also like to do an honorable mention to the quads, hamstrings, core, and wrist muscles as well. Don't forget to train those.
Yeah, there's just so many involved, isn't there? You can't really pick, but there's definitely trends that I've seen in the injuries and the patterns of injury that do happen in badminton players. And it's a bit tricky because we're usually lunging with our dominant leg. We're a little bit one-sided. So my right quad's a lot bigger than my left quad. And of course, my right side of my body, because it's my racket arm, is a lot bigger and more developed and stronger than my left side as well. So after we've basically discussed the really important muscles for badminton, which of these correlate to the most common injuries that we usually see?
This is probably the part where I was really looking forward to talking about, because I've actually got a list of about the 7 or 8 most common injuries in badminton, and I'll list them all now. So the first one is spraining your ankle, and I think everyone can relate to that. Second one would be strains of the muscles of the lower back and the glutes. So especially from that deep lunging in that very fast and awkward position. And then there is Patellar Tendonitis, which in English is basically the muscles around the knee. So when just below the kneecap, people are often seen wearing that knee brace, the little band that goes just on their kneecap, and that's because they get a bit of pain when they're lunging due to the quad muscle pulling on the patellar tendon. The next injury is the rotator cuff. Once again, overuse, as well as the wrist. The wrist one is actually quite unfortunate when people get wrist injuries. Then last year would be tennis elbow and bicep tendonitis. That's 7 all up.
So I think if I look at the injuries I've had, I think I've had all of these, to be absolutely honest. Definitely had ankles, definitely had backs and quad strains. Haven't really had that much. Actually, I did have a hamstring strain. I haven't really had a glute strain, which is, I'm really grateful for that. I did have patellar tendonitis. I have had rotator cuff issues. Wrist overuse, not particularly, but more around the elbow. So yeah, tennis elbow and biceps tendon, yes, and also triceps tendon I've also had, in addition to hip surgery, issues with my my foot, my left big toe in the toe joint. And I can't even remember all of them. There's just so many.
I can also attest to a lot of these injuries as well. Personally, I actually haven't sprained an ankle, which is quite fortunate and a touch wood for me. But my most common injuries in badminton have always been lower back issues, as well as wrist overuse, and one that is touched on here, rotator cuff tendonitis as well. It was actually carried on from an injury I sustained whilst playing tennis, and then I couldn't play badminton as a result for about 6 to 12 months.
Going back to the wrist overuse injury, that's actually a lot more common within untrained or uncoached players when their technique relies more on wrist, a lot of wrist flicks rather than like proper overhead sequenced acceleration. There are sort of different injuries that present more in club players and differently in elite players, but I think that list is pretty comprehensive, and it's a good way to look at what are the risks involved in badminton, and it's a good way to sort of plan out what you want to train.
Great. And I think the point about wrist injuries and technique is huge, because whenever I'm trying to teach someone how to play a shot, and especially smash, because everyone wants the shuttle to go down and hit the ground on the other side, they're always using their wrist in a way that it's kind of just flexing downwards. It's like a woodpecker kind of motion, rather than the actual pronation of the forearm that brings the racket around. And that's where you get all your power, of course. And I think that's a really good point, that a lot of people, they kind of hold the racket in a way where it's just like a woodpecker motion up and down with the wrist. And of course, if I did that, I'm sure I'd get a wrist overuse injury as well. How can people use strength training to prevent these kinds of injuries in badminton?
It's really complicated because every injury sort of has a different cause and effect. But overall, people often have this sort of misconception that the human body is just a machine and every body part joint is only good for like a limited number of uses. But in actuality, our body is actually, everything inside our body is living tissue, and that's including the bones as well. I think to explain all this in good detail, we need to do some quick anatomy, just so everyone sort of understands the terms I'm about to throw around. So I'll just define some quick terms. So our skeleton is made of bone. Bone is living tissue. Bone holds up the body. It provides the structure. Next, we have muscles. Muscles provide movement, but muscles don't actually pull on the bone. The muscle becomes the tendon, which then pulls on the bone. Two bones in contact with each other are called a joint. And then the structures that stabilize the joint, like strings or bands, are ligaments. So with all that, injuries happen when the demands placed on the tissue exceed what the body is currently capable of. If we break down injuries into two categories, we've got like acute injuries, which happen in one instance, and chronic injuries, which happen over time due to overuse. So if we look at how we can use strength training to prevent acute injuries, let's take, for example, the ankle sprains. That's when your body weight is going over the side of your ankle, and then it's getting to a point where the ankle muscles can't actually stabilize the body. It can't bring the body weight back over the ankle, and it results in the joint being stretched and the ligaments being sort of pulled apart, and that's called an ankle sprain. So if you think about the other scenario where the muscles are strong enough to pull the body back on top of the ankle, then we never get to the problem where the ligaments get injured, because as soon as you get to the part where you're about to fall over, you're about to roll the ankle, the muscles fire on, they switch on, and they bring the joint into the correct alignment. If we look at chronic injuries now, which happen due to overuse, it's repeated stress of movement that's causing microscopic tears in the muscle and tendon, and these are building up faster than the body can recover. This would be the underlying mechanism behind injuries such as tennis elbow and patellar tendinopathy. And the way that strength training prevents this is is strength training gives a stimulus to those tendons and muscles to become stronger and thicker. And that's because of the high intensity of the load. Whereas light exercise such as badminton and swinging a light racket, it causes the stress, but it doesn't cause the stimulus for the muscles to get stronger. So that's why it's not recommended, in my opinion, to play badminton without also training your tendons at the gym. Because if you just play badminton, you're going to be straining your tendons and you're not going to have the stimulus for them to get stronger. So that's how strength training can be used to prevent these injuries.
Wow, that was actually very educational, Justin. I really enjoyed that explanation. Certainly the difference between stressing your muscles and injuring them, I believe, the difference between those are significant. So as you said, when you play badminton, you're stressing your muscles, but you're not strengthening them. And I think that's really important for social players, professional players, as injuries, unfortunately, they are very common and they can really knock us back for quite a long time. And because we love badminton so much, obviously we do not want that to happen. We want to keep playing. So these are very good tips. And certainly I feel that strengthening should be a part of most badminton players, maybe not everyone. If you're a social player and you don't have the time or effort to do it, then it might not be for you. But hopefully in the future, as part of your vision, Justin, will be able to help badminton players and people all around the world be absent of these kinds of injuries.
That's the dream.
So this might come as a bit of a strange question because it's a bit about movement and strength building. And I think a lot of the times when people think of strength building, they kind of feel like it's them bulking up, getting big, getting strong. So will the strength training make me bulky and slow on the court?
That's actually a really good question, and it's something that I get asked a lot as a PT. People have this idea in their head that if they go in the gym and pick up weights for a week, like, oh no, they suddenly packed on all the muscle and they look like Miss Olympia. Whereas in actuality, putting on muscle and really building size is a slow, calculated process. When you train strength in the gym, you can prioritize different aspects of strength training. So, for example, if I wanted to increase the size of my muscles, I could focus on lifting the weights really slowly and for longer periods of time. Whereas if I was strength training to optimize power, I would be doing it in more short bursts, focusing on the speed and explosiveness of the movement, while also strengthening the tendons through the same concept of strength training. And then you'd have to do a very, very, in my opinion, unoptimized training routine if the strength benefits you get don't outweigh the slightly added bulk you get from strength training. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just one of those myths that, they think that, hey, I'm not going to do weights. I don't want to be huge. I don't want to be growing muscles out of my ears or anything like that. But I think another thing that people don't realize is that in order for you to put on a lot of bulk, you have to increase your calorie intake as well. Otherwise, how's your body going to build a lot more muscle and make you that much bigger if you're not actually increasing calorie intake? Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. So often when people are properly going for the weightlifting, hypertrophy, bodybuilding strategy, they're actually eating a huge caloric surplus, probably close to 20 to 30% more than what you eat in a normal day. And they're also eating a lot of protein, so getting protein supplements and really making the correct environment for the body to put on muscle. Putting on muscle does not happen by accident. So if you're thinking of strength training for badminton and you're worried you're going to get too muscly, don't worry about that.
So in terms of what someone could do to increase their strength on court and also prevent these injuries, you've convinced them that, hey, they're not going to get huge and muscular and really slow and clumpy around the court because of the strength training. What particular exercises? I know that there's heaps and heaps of exercises out there and we can't explain everything on a podcast. But if you're going to pick some exercises particular to those injuries that you spoke about earlier, could you give us some exercises as to what someone could do from today? They could listen to this podcast and think, look, I'm going to start doing this now.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you have access to a gym because that's sort of what the whole theme is today, strength training. There are strength training programs that can be done without a gym. But I think if you're really serious about your performance and your health, you should get a gym membership. The number one exercise, and this one I can comfortably rank number one, is weighted barbell back squat. So that's when you put the weight on your back and then you squat down to about 90 degrees. And that's probably one of the most common exercises that people would be doing at the gym. And the reason it's so important is that it trains almost every single major muscle group in the body in one go. And learning how to do this properly really helps you move your body more powerfully and efficiently. So barbell back squats is my top exercise.
I think this is a very important exercise, but I'd like for the audience to probably get a bit of a better picture of how that's done, because you talked about how it's such a important exercise for most of your muscle groups. Can you give me a bit more information about how I could perform this in the gym?
This is a fun challenge because I've never had to describe an exercise using just my voice with no videos or pictures or demonstration, but I think it can be done. Okay, so the exercise we're looking at is the weighted barbell back squat. It is an exercise that trains the muscle groups of the lower limbs. So that's the quads, the hamstrings, and the glute muscles, with a bit of involvement from the back as well, just because the weight that you will be putting is placed on your upper back. So what you should be picturing in your head is imagine that you're standing up, and then you sit down in a chair behind you. Now you take away the chair, and that's the squatting motion. What you do next is that you put a weight on your back. So on your upper back, the barbell should rest just behind your neck. And from the starting position where you're standing with the weight on your back, you should keep your back straight and imagine sitting back into the chair with control. Pause for half a second at the bottom and then push up explosively. And that's how you should perform the barbell back squat.
How far do you usually say that people need to go down? Because when I personally go to the gym, I go to about 90, but there's some people going to basically full squat. And what's the consequences of that? I always had this thought that, look, I don't really want to do that because I want to save my knees. And in the sport of badminton, I'm never squatting that low anyways. So in terms of specificity for the sport, it probably doesn't seem like it's necessary. But what's your opinion on that?
Good question. Actually, just a few months ago, I would have just told people squat 90 degrees or squat the parallel. But what I read from what the Malaysian players are doing, so looking at videos of Lee Chong Wei strength training, looking at papers and all that stuff, or what is most common among professional players is actually almost half depth squats. So rather than squatting all the way down to 90 degrees, and definitely not all the way down, most professional strength coaches are getting their badminton players to squat halfway between standing and 90 degrees. And what this does is it lets them actually squat a heavier weight because it's not as difficult of a movement. And it also makes the movement more translatable for badminton because you're rarely actually squatting that deep during a game. So getting ready for all the gym haters to say, oh, squat 90 or squat all ask the grass. But in terms of what's best for badminton players, it's reasonable to say that you don't actually need to squat that deep. You should be focusing on squatting a heavy load with control and power.
Great. That's really useful information, Justin. So other than the squat, what else could we be doing?
Well, something that I think everyone can do, even without a gym, is balance training. And that's just standing on one leg, making sure that you feel a bit wobbly and trying to keep your balance. And what this does is it trains your ankle stability in every direction. And it's something that I do every day. It's something that I get every single one of my patients to do, even if they don't have any ankle problems. So balance is the next big one. The last joint that I think is going to be a good balance between performance improving as well as preventing injuries is the shoulder. The shoulder comes into play for a lot of the movements, and the overhead press is a good way of loading the shoulder muscles responsible for smashing. So that's more of a direct overhead press. Let me give you guys a picture in your head. Is imagine you're holding a broomstick horizontally in both hands, starting below your chin, and then you're simply pushing the broomstick straight up above your head, not letting the broomstick come forwards, but coming up and down in basically a straight line. And that is the overhead press. So that trains the shoulder muscles. Other things that you should do for your shoulder would be stabilizing it. So that's more of the rotator cuff and rotating oh my goodness, this is going to be hard to explain about my anatomical terms that only I talk in. Mm-hmm. But if you hold your shoulder, if you bring your arm up to your side at 90 degrees, and then you bend the elbow so that it is parallel to your body, so straight up. If you bend it forwards, that's internal rotation. And then if you bend it backwards, that's external rotation. And those two movements are something that's really important to train the rotator cuff. And it's good to practice these movements with a bit of dumbbell or cable weights, just because the rotator cuff isn't something that normally gets strengthened, and it's something that gets really, really used during the game of badminton.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That's something that we religiously did. We did it before gym sessions, we did even our warm-ups. We had our TheraBands out and we were doing rotator cuff stuff when we were warming up as well. So that was a huge one for me personally for shoulder injuries.
So Justin, moving on from the 2 to 3 exercises that you would recommend to badminton players, I want to ask you for 3 pieces of advice that you'd give someone who is going to start incorporating these exercises in their training.
What I would say is that if you're about to start a strength training regime, it's really important to focus on your technique. And that means learning how to do the move properly before you start really loading it up. So my first point is start light and focus on technique. My second point is, I'm going to ramble on about this one, is learn how to feel the muscle activation within your body. So that means that if you're doing a bicep curl, you need to do the movement and actually close your eyes and feel the bicep muscle contracting. And I think developing this mind-muscle connection is really important for athletes, and it really helps you maximize the benefits you'll get from your strength training. The last point I'll make is progressive overload. And that's really the key to strength training is you pick up a 5 kilo weight today, next week you pick up a 6 kilo weight. It needs to get heavier over time, because if you keep lifting the same weight, you're always getting that same level of stimulus and your body's going to be like, oh, that's it. I'm done. I'm good at this. I don't need to get stronger. But if you progressively overload the weight, then that's how you ensure continued progress over time.
Yeah, and I hope everyone listens to those pieces of advice and uses them when they actually get into the gym and they start doing these exercises. Of course, we couldn't give you a whole gym program on this podcast, but potentially it's just a start, an introduction to get you in there so that you can both prevent the injuries that can happen when you're playing. And also they're going to help you with your game as well. You should feel that you're stronger in your lunges. You should feel that your ankles, for example, are more stable and you prevent that rolling effect of it. And then shoulder, you might be able to smash for a lot longer without having a sore shoulder. So there's so many benefits in doing this, whether you're a social player or if you're trying to be a professional badminton player.
And hopefully that can maximize your time as a badminton player on court and in life.
Exactly.
So Justin, just finishing up here, is there anything else that you want to add?
I think it's time to reveal the project that we've been working on.
Yeah, why not? I think it's a good time now.
Okay, so I've been writing a strength and conditioning ebook in collaboration with Volant. The strength and conditioning ebook is going to be split into a 3 or 4 part series. And the first one will be on strength training, and that will be released sometime this month on the Volant website. So if you enjoyed the knowledge I was giving today about strength training, the book's going to really be a really useful resource for you to refer to at the gym and sort of understand the purpose of strength training. Any questions that you might have should hopefully be answered by that book. And yeah, just keep an eye out on the website and it'll be out shortly.
I think that would be really great because I bet that there are so many people who just want more information about it, especially because it's specific to badminton. And there's not many books or educational resources there that are specific to badminton based on science and based on your background as an exercise physiologist. So you know the actual structures, the systems and everything related to the body that's needed for badminton. And you can take that view of it rather than just someone who plays. And then I'm really happy to say that I've been able to contribute a bit to that in terms of the training that I've done and the training that I know that the top players do, because I've been training in Asia, in Europe and all over the world as well. So yeah, that is a really exciting project we're moving forward together with.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much for your help writing that. And can I just say the sort of advice for exercise you get on the internet for badminton right now is shocking. Pretty much every program just says, oh, skipping, that's a good exercise. It uses the arms and legs. And yeah, there's really not a lot of science behind the sort of programs that we're seeing on the internet right now. So that's why I think this book really is coming out at a good time.
And if the ebook is like anything you discussed in this podcast today, I'm sure it's going to be of so much value to badminton players all around the world. Justin, thank you so much for coming onto our podcast today.
It's my pleasure, Henry and Jeff. Being on this podcast was really, really fun opportunity for me, and I can't thank you guys enough. If I could just give one or two pieces of advice for everyone listening, I'm very passionate about the sportsmanship or the camaraderie of badminton players. So my advice to everyone playing is that you should focus on improving yourself. And if you're ever in an uncomfortable situation where you feel like your partner might have let you down and you're unhappy about this or that, I say always look at yourself. Always blame yourself before you blame anyone else. And it's just accept sometimes that people are just playing to have fun. Always make new players feel welcome because you are new at some point. And yeah, happy badminton.
Justin, there were so many invaluable things that I took away from this podcast, and I hope all the listeners did as well. The one thing that came to mind when I thought, hey, what's someone going to get out of this, is that even if you are a social player and you're not looking to be a professional, you just do it for the fun, you do it for exercise, and you do it to be with your friends. I think a lot of the social players think that just because they're not a professional, they don't need to do the strength training. And I love the way that Justin put it, that he basically said, look, if you're not doing strength training, you're going to reduce the amount of time you can be on court, and the play isn't going to be as good as well. So I think that's one thing to take home with you, in that you don't have to be a professional to get onto the strength training, because it is really, really important for injury prevention as well as improvement.
And for me, I feel like there are a lot of unique messages in this podcast that I've taken away. One of the key things that I found really helpful and useful for my understanding was the difference between stressing your muscles and strengthening your muscles. So as Justin explained very clearly, when you're playing badminton, and you might be playing badminton socially, you might be playing badminton competitively, you are stressing your muscles when you're playing. Whereas when you're actually doing strength conditioning, you're actually building those muscles up so they can continue to be stressed when you do play badminton. And that sort of ties on to being a social badminton player and strengthening your muscles as well, just like Jeff said. So I think that was something that I took away that was really key. So thank you for tuning into the Badminton Podcast. We will continue to push you to grow as a player and a person with special guests like Justin Lee. Make sure that you keep sharing your love of the sport with everyone and show the world how incredible badminton is, because it really is.
And if you want to connect with us, you can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube using the handle Volantwear, VOLANTWEAR, or connect with us on our website, www.volantwear.com. And make sure you stay tuned for Justin's ebook, which will be awesome. It will be a wealth of knowledge that will really help you out.
This podcast was brought to you by Volantwear, the most versatile badminton apparel you'll ever own.